A baby for Hodie. The day's date is July 13, 2020 or 6260. This is the African Liberation Media. For the past several years, we have tried to engage the public in some of the critical issues. I'll start by saying that in 6260, we're still governed by the slave code. What's the problem? It's a European problem. The justification of a man is shadowed to justify a system of exploitation. It is sad to say that the lie has been internalized not only by the European, but in the souls of black folk. I'm here with brothers Amos, brothers Makiru, and of course we have a special guest, brother Sundiata, who Amos will be talking with for the bulk of the program. Gentlemen, take it wherever you want to take it.
A baby for Hodie, African family. Tonight we have a very special guest that's been on our programs in the past. But tonight, what we're going to talk about tonight is pivotal to African people in this current century that we're in and going forward. When you talk about African survival, African sovereignty, and African spirituality. And the last term that I use specifically points to the reason why this brother is here. This brother is very much into African spirituality, traditional African spirituality. And what we're going to get into tonight is not just talking about religion and where religion has failed us, but it's really talking about solutions to spiritual issues that exist within the African makeup on this planet. Things that we need to address within ourselves, within our beliefs going forward, and how we can pull different aspects of spiritual systems that existed for thousands of years, not only across the continent, but in African people in general, into something that can benefit us going forward for the rest of our existence on this planet. So I want to introduce to you the brother who needs really no introduction, especially in the Charlotte community, for the amount of work that this brother has put in. Brother Sundiata, Ayotunde Sundiata, how you doing, brother?
I'm excellent. Thank you. Love, good to be here. Good to see my elders. This is a pleasure.
Let me say something before Brother Sundiata starts, and that is the reason we have African Liberation Media is because Brother Sundiata called a group of us together over 3 years ago. We had a gathering, at his home, and during the process of brainstorming or just trying to be operate in the spirit of Kuumba creativity, we started tossing around ideas, and the idea of starting a podcast was developed during the conversations that took place on that evening. And it's no surprise that Brother Sundiata's would be one of the progenitors of this program, because I met this a young brother to me then when he returned from his state paid vacation.
That's right.
And he jumped in right with us as we were protesting at that time against the killings of some African people by the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department. But over the years, this brother has always possessed one of the most creative minds that I've ever been associated with. And believe me, I've been associated with a lot of people, in the struggle for African Liberation Media, and he has one of the most creative minds. So when Brother almost told me about this concept that he and Sundiata and some others were working on. It came as no surprise to me, but I just wanted the audience to know. For those who don't know, I'm sure a lot of our longtime listeners know, but just more formally given. And he not one of these guys that's walking around give me credit for this. And this brother's only concerned about one thing: the liberation and empowerment of African people.
That's right.
He's like a lot of the rest of us. Don't invite me for no recognition or nothing until African people are liberated. You know what I mean? Unless I happen to strike a mighty blow. But you know, that's the way he is. And so I just wanted to say that formally, you know, for our audience. So go ahead, brother, with that said.
That's right. Thank you, Elder.
All right, brother Sundiata. You know, I'm gonna ask a few questions, and some of these questions I probably know the answers to, but for our listening audience, and I may not know the answer to. I mean, you may drop something on me tonight that even some things that I haven't thought of or even processed as of yet. But for our listening audience and for the viewers who will be watching this, tell us your definition, your personal definition of African spirituality.
So I tend to use the word African spiritual science, because that's exactly what we're working with. We're working with a science. It is the interaction of humans, right? Black African humans with the natural world, which includes the cosmos. And so within that cosmos, there are spiritual energies, elements that we call divinities, whether those divinities are Orisha, Netas, or Bosums, or what have you. But all African spiritual science is how we function in that, how we manipulate those things and interact with those things to improve not only the quality of our lives, but the quality of this life. And so that interaction, that symbiotic relationship that we have with everything as one functioning system along with us, that is what African spiritual science is, our relationship with those things.
And I think it's very important that you put science into it, specifically because in certain situations, a lot of times we tend to get very, very, what people tend to call spooky.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
a lot of times that leads us to either bad decision making or not really having a solid foundation behind what we believe or what the thoughts we try to put forth. So there has to be a sense of knowing what we're talking about. So I think that is pivotal. Now, and we talked about this in the past, the importance of a spiritual system for African people. You know, a lot of times we get off on a tangent about, you know, the effect of the white Jesus and the effect of Christianity and Judaism and Islam. But we don't really bring forth those type of solutions that can help to not only fix the issues that those spiritual systems cause against us, but give us something that we can then utilize within ourselves. So before we get into the solution that you're proposing, or one of the solutions that you're proposing for African people, just talk a little bit about your journey into African spiritual science and the correlation of that in the specific spiritual systems that you have experience in practice.
Yeah. So, like many, I grew up. I won't say I grew up a Christian. Right? I grew up believing that there was a God and there was a Jesus, but my parents didn't make us go to church, right? So I wasn't raised in a church going household. I had one aunt I love, who used to pull up at least 1 or 2 Sundays out of the month in that big blue Cadillac. And she was the one that said, y'all may not be going to church, but I'm going to save these babies, right? So load the babies up in this car and let me take them to church. So I came up in the church via my aunt and my grandmother, right on Bates Ford Road, Friendship Baptist Church. And so I carried that for a long time, right? So my journey was a little different. In no stretch of imagination did I engage the church. I fell asleep most days. I only liked certain songs that I would stay up on. One being "This Little Light of Mine," and that was it. And then, for those who don't know, I got involved in this bad belief that I was a gangster, that I was some street guy. I believed it, and because I believed it, my actions followed. And so I got very heavily involved in street activity, was in and out of jails, in and out of psychiatric facilities, and you name it. If they could lock you up in it, they found a way to lock me up in it. And just kind of through the course of that, I got sick and tired, as Fannie Lou would say. I got sick and tired of being sick and tired about 17, which is strange. You think about somebody 17, you don't imagine that they already tired of life. But when you've been shot, when you've been incarcerated, when you've been poked and prodded in psychiatric hospitals, put on psychiatric drugs, and you trying to figure out how did I get here? What is this? What is where did I go wrong? And in that process of kind of figuring that out, I thought maybe if I go back to school, because I dropped out of school, maybe if I go back to school, get myself together, I'll figure my life out and ease my way out of these streets. So I enrolled to go to school at Central Piedmont. While I was at Central Piedmont, I guess, what was in me started happening because I was a part of organizing the first Black student organization. Now, let me just backtrack a little bit. My father, I grew up looking at Franz Fanon, Wretched of the Earth. I grew up with Native Son. I grew up with Autobiography of Malcolm X. I grew up with T-shirts saying, free South Africa, right? I grew up with T-shirts with Stephen Biko. That was my father. So I won't act like this just came out of nowhere. I just didn't pay it any attention. It was there. I had it. I wore it. My father, as part of punishment, my father would have me read encyclopedias and write reports. So it was there. So it wasn't some strange thing for me to arrive on a community college campus, start to gravitate towards Black folks who were trying to organize to do something positive, and then develop a Black student organization. But along that process, I met a brother named Shawade, and that brother was Muslim. And that brother introduced me to 2 books. He said, "Brother, I don't know what you're into. I don't know what your beliefs are. All I'm going to ask you is to read these 2 books. I know you got a lot of questions, but read these, and then I'll answer the questions I can for you." And he gave me the Gospel of Barnabas and Jesus, the Prophet of Islam. And they were good books. I came back. He was able to answer a lot of the questions I had at the time about religion and spirituality in a way that connected with me. And before I knew it, I was taking my Kalima Shahada and becoming Muslim, right? So I was Muslim, but maybe some months after that, I was charged with an armed robbery that I didn't commit, and began this process of going to trial. I prayed and prostrated 5 times a day to Allah, asking Allah to remove this burden from me. Went to court and was still found guilty and sentenced to 14 years, 7 mandatory in the state of North Carolina. So when I was in the county jail, there weren't a lot of Muslims. And my thinking started becoming, maybe because I traded on Jesus, this happened to me. And then it was co-signed by an older brother. And they was like, "Yeah, brother, you mean you, man, yeah, Jesus could have got you out of it." Right? And then, when you facing, you got 14 years and you don't know what's next, it all sounds good. Like, so I went back to Christianity. And I went back earnestly this time, though. Listen, I wanted just a Bible thumper, brother. I hit the state of North Carolina prison system Pope Houston of 1900 Blue Ridge Boulevard. My nickname was the Holy Hitman.
Mm.
And I knew that Bible forward, backwards, and again. And I would hunt down, listen, brother, hunt down Muslims, 5%ers, anybody who was attacking Christians, and go to war with them with my Bible. It was good. It was good at it, brother. And that lasted a while, and I started having these other questions, though. The more I studied, the more I researched. I started having other questions. Brothers couldn't answer this. The people who were coming out of the street to evangelize in the prison systems couldn't answer them. And I finally ran into this brother named Bilal, who was an Ansar at the time. This was Dr. York before he became Dr. York. He was Imam al-Hadi al-Mahdi, right? And he started introducing me to the Ansar Allah doctrines. And because there was this good blend of use of the Quran, the Kitabullah, and the Bible, it was an easier transition for me. But one of the things that really stuck out to me, Imam Isa at the time was explaining how white people weren't human. And I was like, whoa, yeah, I like that. And so, you know, I had went through this period of non-denomination. I'm nothing. I'm just spiritual. You know, we have those moments. And then I became an Ansar. So then I'm back in Islam, but this time it's not Sunni, right? It's not Orthodox Islam. This is Islam with a black liberation twist to it. So I started organizing in the prisons. In every camp, I became a very serious threat in state prisons in North Carolina, because every camp I went on, probably, I would say honestly, 30 to 40% of the brothers on that camp, I converted into Islam. But not only that, it still was that with the primary focus on liberating ourselves as black people from what I believed at that time was the religion of our slave masters. And so I started running to other brothers, brother named Free Albon, who started introducing to me to comedic science. So I started infusing a little bit of that. Then I started bumping head with even some Muslim brothers who was liberated, because this thing didn't really feel that African, didn't feel that black, even though they was calling the white man the devil and all of this existed. It didn't feel like home. And so when I finally came home, the brothers that I connected with when I came home, my elder right on this line started introducing me to the Dr. Clarks, the Dr. Benz, the Amos N. Wilsons, right? I had never read any of these literatures. I was, you know, I had read some things, but nowhere near on the level what McEnroe was introducing me to. And my good brother Trigg, started introducing me to the Bobby Hemmings and the Phil Valentines and the David Blairs. And then my good brother Roman started introducing me to comedic science. And I ran into big brother Ra Auntie of the Asar Set. And I started going on retreats with the Asar Set Society. Then a sister named Jay-Z had to ask me a question one day. She said, how you trade in one slave master for another slave master? I said, whoa, what are you talking about? So she started talking about the Arab spin. And then a brother, the straw that broke the bull's back was one day I went to Jumu'ah service over on Tuckasegee when the mosque was on Tuckasegee. And the brother said, brother, I heard you was down at Kwanzaa. I said, yeah, I was down at Kwanzaa. Brother, you know you shouldn't go down to Kwanzaa. So why shouldn't I go down to Kwanzaa? You know, they be down there pouring that libation, worshiping the ancestors. And that is shirk, brother. That is association things with Allah. I said, brother, you are wrong. That's great. And it took me literally maybe 2 weeks of just studying in the Quran, looking into the hadiths, looking for something. And I found this one ayah. I don't remember what surah it's in, but I found this one ayah where Musa said, I hope that my name is mentioned on the tongues of truth in the next generation to come. I said, that's libation. That's libation. Ran back with that. Then it hit me. These brothers don't want me to be African. They want me to be Arab. I seen brothers putting the henna in their beards and rolling their pants. No disrespect. But that wasn't the Jalabias. This wasn't who I was. This wasn't my culture. This was a culture that came into Africa. And so it was at that moment I severed ties with Islam completely and started my journey to African spiritual science.
So with that journey into African spiritual science, you mentioned specifically that the turning point was, even in Islam, is when you were able to see yourself. You were able to start to see yourself in the religion, as far as seeing black people,
Yes,
right?
yes, yes,
So
yes.
explain the importance of that, because I think that's one of the biggest problems I believe in in the African community when it comes to these religions. And you've heard people, like Omawale Malcolm X say,
So
basically leave your religion at the door,
yeah,
that you're black
yeah,
first.
yeah,
You've heard elders like Ashraf Kwesi talk about the white idolatry, how people suffer from that, from the effect of the white idolatry. So when you saw yourself in this religion, and you said that that was the turning point, explain why specifically that now being connected to the religion from a cultural, well, I can't say cultural, but from a ethnic standpoint,
yeah,
really started to turn things around for you.
yeah. Again, my upbringing, right? My father was very, very clear that I was a black man. Very, very clear. Made it very, very clear that I was to never engage white women. I'm talking about,
Mm.
listen, my father showed me the picture of Emmett Till in Jet Magazine. He gave me no context. He showed me the picture and said, this is what happened when you talk to white women. Listen, brother, he did no other context. So I believe, like, as soon as you just even speak to him, the clan or somebody was just going to come out of nowhere, and that's what was going to happen to you. So that's the father I had. I always say that my first words was probably cracking because my father said it at least 5 times a day.
Mm.
And that's the household. So when I saw that in context to a spiritual system, I felt like I was closer to home. It's kind of like you see the sign and you say, oh, you headed to North Carolina from New York, and you see a sign that says Charlotte, North Carolina, whatever the first city is you come into, 100 miles. You like, oh, I'm close. I'm almost there. You get a little energized because you know you're closer to being home.
Mm.
And so that's what it felt like. I felt like I didn't know whether I had it right. It felt right because it was empowering me. And you got to understand that this was also on the back of me having read Native Son, me having read Autobiography of Malcolm X, me having read, all of the materials that I've read. And this my love, like most young men who go into incarceration, right? They love and their fascination with Omar Wally Malcolm X. Like every black man that comes to a sense of self that's incarcerated believes he's Omar Wally.
Mm.
And so this brought me closer to Omar Wally. Of course, I studied the minister, listened to his cassette tapes, and had read a Message to the Black Man in America, and had that idea that we were divine, we were gods. And so for me to have a religion that allowed me to, uh, not stray too far from what I had accepted, which was Islam, but also embrace this idea that me as a black man was a divine source on this planet Earth, that I had some cultural and community responsibility as a spiritual person. The church didn't mandate that of me. The church didn't mandate that I was responsible for my community as a black man. And so all of those things combined just came at this head with the Ansar uh, sect of Islam.
So that background definitely gives us an understanding of the journey and the path to where you currently are now. I see the shrine behind you.
There it
Uh,
is. There it
so
go.
it's pretty evident where you are now. But let's talk about some of the problems we're seeing today, and this is what we're really gonna get into uh, the solutions. Um, so you're talking about started a new religion, and a lot of people, a lot of black people would say that we don't need another religion, right?
Yeah.
So, going to this new concept of this religion that I feel is a primary solution for African people, not only in the 21st century that we're in now, but in centuries beyond.
Mm-hmm.
Talk a little bit about what that religion is, and then I want you to go into what makes this different than everything that we've heard before.
Gotcha. So I'm gonna ask a question of you and the elders to set the stage for that. What does religion mean?
My definition of religion is basically a set of rules, regulations, and rituals that people follow that bind them together towards one common belief, understanding, and goal.
Gotcha. Elder, would you co-sign that definition?
What?
Definitely, I would. I mean, we have to look at since Christianity pretty much dominates African people that believe in any kind of religion here in the West. I think there are more people who practice Islam on the African continent. But if we go back to Constantine, in addition to what Brother Amos said, it was designed to be an institutional force to achieve political, economic, cultural, imperial domination, objectives.
Gala, you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, religion, strongly held belief, backed by action.
Mm.
Now here in the Western Hemisphere, the most dominant religion is the religion of white supremacy, and its sacrament racism. For the average person in the church, religion is determined by where you put your faith. Is it in God, Yahweh, Shango, or is it in your savings account? That's basically my position. And of course, the souls of black folk, the lie, be it religion, be it white superiority, be it the plethora of ideology that has been put forth, we have internalized it in our souls.
Yes.
So, we have adopted the religion of white supremacy. No point in elaborating on it, when we see it manifested every day in terms of the suicide, homicide, the synthesis of it. And the mere fact, like Amos Wilson used to talk, that he articulated so well, the fact that we are a dominated people, and you don't, you're not brought under domination to serve your interest or to serve the interest of the God you profess. You're brought under domination to serve the interest of the dominator. That's your religion.
That's become our religion. Agreed.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So this is why I asked, because look how beautifully that set the stage. See, one thing I want to always be clear. We can't just throw a term out there. We have to let the people know what we mean by the term.
Absolutely.
We will not lead them to their own, understanding or conclusion about what we mean. So this is what I mean. One of the things that was common through everyone's response was belief, right? And this implies the ism on the end of ancestralism, which is the religion that we are proposing. This belief. And what do we believe, right? So if we looked at the Nguzo Saba, and Nguzo Saba talks about believing in our teachers, believing in our communities, believing in our parents, right? It is this strong, overwhelming trust and belief. Well, who should we trust? What wisdom should we trust? Who should we believe in, right? And I think the common point that we can all come to, whether regardless of your other beliefs, is that our ancestors are critically important to our liberation. They are the libraries, the examples, and we're not just talking about ancestors because somebody transitioned. So I think that's one of the places we have to start at, right? That in our spiritual sciences, there are levels to those who have transitioned. And those who are the ancestors, in Isheshe we call Egungun. In Kemet they call the Shept or the Shepsu, right? These are elevated ancestors, and they are elevated because of how they lived their life on this plane, right? They were ancestors before they transitioned. So you began the process of being an elevated, honored ancestor by the way you live your life now. So this doesn't require that you put down any other belief other than your belief, as Gullah said, in the belief of the religion of white supremacy, right? The two things can't occupy the same space at the same time, right? And I'll just give you this real quick. My first real experience, spiritual experience, I went down to Gainesville, Florida, and participated in a ritual sacrifice to the ancestors. And it was in this ritual that I partook in all of the physical things that I did, the things that I consumed. I elevated in my consciousness to a space that I realized that the only thing that can completely detox my person from my Eurocentric ways was African spiritual science. Because as science tells us, two things can't occupy the same space at the same time. I cannot be completely consumed by African spirit, drum, dance, food, language, right? All of the things that they took away from us. Think about the things that they found critical to take away from us. That's not just, they kidnapped us and imprisoned us, but what, all the people that they have done this to on the planet, why do they deem it absolutely necessary to rob the African of their concept of spirituality, their language, their musical instruments, their dance? Get what I'm saying? And African spirit science brings that all back to you. There's no way you can participate in an African spirit science and not put on African garbs, not speak African language, not eat African food and drink African drink, not engage in the worship of African spiritual deities, right? All of those things, the dances, all of it, in one place at one time, is the only thing that will save us. So as we began to talk, right, and in the process of what I was attempting to do at the school, I was attempting to make the school a epicenter of African life in Charlotte. And at the center of that African life, at its nucleus, was a Pan-African community shrine where people can come and not just pour water and call names, but to elevate, activate, and engage ancestral energy for the liberation of African people here in Charlotte and abroad. Right? And so when you came to me and said, brother, listen, I got this idea, right? That we should do a new religion based in ancestral veneration. I was like, man, listen, with you. There, because it's the one thing that we don't have to argue about. We don't argue about our ancestors. It's like arguing about whether Kobe, Mike, or LeBron are great. I ain't talking about who was the GOAT. I'm talking about their greatness. We don't argue their greatness, right? So we don't. These elevated ancestors. Nobody argue over Wiley's greatness. Even his enemies don't argue his greatness. It's brothers on this planet who are still living that despise Omar Wiley Malcolm X, but won't dare denounce his greatness and his impact, right, on this world. And so that is a point that I think and that we agreed on, that we can all bring people together in the belief, organizing our belief and taking direct instruction from the wisdom of our illustrious ancestors and being guided and adding on to it, because African spiritual science is a living organism. It does not stay stagnated in our glorious past. As wonderful as it is, it must shape and mold itself to fit the times and the space that we and the conditions that we find ourselves in. And this is why we developed here hoodoo, juju, rigri, wanga, right? All of these things that came over Obey, right? And all these things, all these systems that we find in the diaspora, right? Ocha, all of these things were our ancestors being culturally responsible for to the conditions that they were in. These spiritual systems were birthed out of a sense of liberation to bring us back to Haitian voodoo, right? All of those things. So we want to tie into those things, but we don't want to be separated by those things. And our understanding was the one thing that will get rid of the dividing lines, those things that we find difference in different spiritual systems, is that we all agree in ancestor veneration.
And I want to get back to one of the things you just mentioned in regards to the ancestralism. And really, when you talk about the veneration of our ancestors, really it's not even a belief. It's really us knowing.
Yeah.
That's one of the things when you look at a religion like a Christianity or Judaism or Islam, those are belief systems in a God that many people don't really know whether those gods exist. Versus with a spiritual science like ancestralism, we know that our ancestors existed in this realm.
Ashe.
We know that we can pull from the lessons and the teachings of our ancestors to help guide us in and help us navigate not only towards African liberation, but also towards African prosperity here in this realm that we existing in right now.
Yeah.
So
but we must be structured and organized in that knowing.
That's
and
right.
then implies why a new religion, because it's not just believing, it is not just knowing, it's being structured, organized, and to Guller's point, in action with this. You can't say, oh man, I love Dessalines, I love Jean-Jacques Dessalines. Do you? Do you? Because nothing you are doing say that you are inspired by and love Jean-Jacques Dessalines. You say, oh, I went to prison, I got my life together, I got knowledge of self, brother, I'm the new Malcolm X. Are you? Do you know who Malcolm was? Do you know what he did? You see his actions, right? And so, very much to your point, we have to then organize ourselves into action around this belief. And I say that the greatest form of ancestor veneration is ancestor continuation, right? It is to pick up the baton and run hard with it. Run until they tell you your time to stop running has come, right? Or you're cut down while you're running. But you should be running with a mission in hand. So if you love Amos N. Wilson so much, then if he said that Blueprint for Black Power was just an introduction, right? Then you should be writing the rest of the book, right? If that's the baton you choose to carry, then finish his work because his work wasn't finished. People love being. We can say crazy. Crazy. Oh, got the craft? I'm going to carry the craft.
Mm.
Right? So that's ancestor continuation. That's the highest form of veneration, is when we have improved upon. We're supposed to be improving upon Jop by now. What the new information that we have in genetic science that Jop didn't have, we are supposed to be advancing upon the two cradle theory. We can't just keep quoting them and referencing them. We're supposed to be raising children that are going into labs, doing the research, and coming back and creating cures for the ills that most plague the African community. Because that's what Carter G. Woodson would have been doing. Right? Right? So we can't say we admire these giants. And plenty of sisters too. Forgive me for not having mentioned the sisters by now. I want them sisters to tear me apart. You can't love Yahweh Santa Wah and not be a sister on the front line. Right? So I'm just saying we just calling their names. A lot of times I'm very critical of the fact that we pour water, we call names, and when the ancestors come, this is why we say rest in power, because they are not power. They are not conformed or restricted by the physical anymore. And we should be calling them into the room with marching orders to join us in a struggle. Not just join us in a lecture. And I'm all for a lecture, had plenty of them, right? But we can't just call them in the room to enjoy a lecture. And the lecture pretty much is based on their work. They heard it, they wrote it. Right? What's the marching orders?
Well, let me ask you this. Let's get back to the everyday practical things that the people within our race who may not be sophisticatedly aware of in regards to the different higher versions of African spiritual science, and they may not understand some of the names. They may not understand. They may not even know some of the ancestors' names that we call, or what that person did in their lifetime. But just looking at a structure of a black spiritual system is what I like to call a black spiritual system, particularly black, because sometimes we can get lost in the term African and not realize that a lot of Africa, all of Africa is not black Africa.
It's not.
So we have to put the term black in there, especially for y'all that hate the term black. I love to use the term black. But it's saying that the practical things within our race, like a black man marrying a black woman.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
One of the things that you'll see when you look at religions like Judaism, where they have this belief that they are God's chosen children, God's chosen people. Essentially, something that they really took from African people and formulated into their own esoteric belief system that helps them to manifest things here in the physical realm. How can this particular spiritual system, ancestralism, help us with the practical things that we deal with in regards to not being for integration, in regards to supporting each other in black business, or supporting each other economically, being a family? Talk about some of those things that things like this can help with.
Absolutely. So ancestralism is a culturally responsible, right, spiritual system. And when I say we have a responsibility, right, to our culture, and that is for our own genetic survival, why you can't come home with a non-black African, right? It is for our intellectual survival. This is why we have to have our own black institution of learners that tells our story, our narrative, our way. See, it's interesting that everybody talks about changing the narrative. I'm not trying to change no narrative. I never had that narrative, right? Like, my father never allowed me to have another narrative other than black folk are excellent and great. So that's me trying to change somebody else's mind about me, and I don't have time for that. And so ancestralism is about the complete liberation and eventual sovereignty of African people. It is about using our ancestral energy, lessons, and wisdom to be a free, proud, and productive sovereign people once again. And I want to be very clear. I make a distinction between being liberated and being sovereign, right? And I focus on liberation now because it's the stage that we're in. We're trying to liberate ourselves from a system of dependency, right? To being able to be self-sufficient. The capacity to be self-governed is another level that requires a lot of other steps, right? But ancestralism is designed to guide and direct us to that by taking the lessons of our ancestors. We take IAT, for example. IAT was the first nation in the entire world to outlaw slavery, right? In the entire world, right? First one. That is ancestralism. We are taking the lessons from those ancestors who understood that. When Dessalines said, I don't even want to see a white stripe in the Haitian flag, right? That is ancestralism because these are the lessons where we are taking our cues from Nama, right? From Queen Hatshepsut. From these ancestors, we are taking our cues on how to be a nation. See, because we don't know how to be a nation because we never lived in a time where we were a nation of people outside of colonialism and being colonized. We don't know that. So the only lessons we have in that is from the lessons of our ancestors who instruct and guide us on what that looks like. We take that wisdom and we improve upon it. So that's what ancestralism is about. So when you talk about the economics, right, we're trying to figure out how to formulate a better version of capitalism and make it work for black folks. And I get it. For the time being, do what you got to do, right, until you figure out. But know and understand, if you are not educating another generation of children to create a different type of economic system that works for the improvement and betterment of African people worldwide, you are doing a disservice to yourself and a dishonor to your ancestors who already had economic systems before this system ever came into existence, right? So we are talking about not just separating ourselves physically from Eurocentric ways and Urugu. We're talking about separating ourselves altogether. See, our liberation doesn't lie in our capacity to defeat the European. See, European are designed around objects, right? Right? They're designed for objects. We're the greatest objects they've ever possessed, right? They hold museums are full of the greatest objects that they ever possessed were African people. And all African people have to do is refuse to be the possessions and the property of Europeans. That should be our focus, not how to beat them at war. We'll fight them as we need to fight them. We'll do what we need to do, but our focus has to be how do we repair ourselves and get ourselves back on track. And that's what ancestralism is designed to do by taking the wisdom and the guidance of our ancestors and moving it forward.
Ashe. And I think the reason why I think that's important, one of the things I think that's lost or has been lost in the understanding of, and I forgot to mention this when you asked about earlier about the definition, our individual definitions of religion. One of the things that people sometimes forget is that a religion or a spiritual practice is supposed to be built around providing for the people that believe in it. So when you look at different spiritual systems throughout African history, those spiritual systems were built around African people gaining land, resources, and other things that will help them to benefit their community. But when you're trapped inside of a spiritual system that's not only focused on other people, but that's owned, operated, and ran by another race, then your belief is continuing to benefit them, which really ultimately makes you a slave of that religion and a slave of those people. And I go back to Judaism again. One of the reasons why the continuation of their ability to be able to manifest what they have been able to do on this planet and exploit other people has been through the use of their spiritual system that they have then forced on other people under a different interpretation, a different understanding from what they understand it as being. So I think
Yeah.
with ancestralism, this could serve really as a power base for African people to do what our ancestors told us to do, which is know thyself. Our ancestors didn't say, man, believe in God. They said, know
So
thyself.
let me say this almost. Here's why I lean hard on the belief part though, right? Because there's a necessary power in belief. You mentioned the Israelis, right? The I don't know whether they Jews. I don't want my brothers getting man. They Jewish. I got tired of filter through all that, right? So just know I understand, but hear me out, right? They didn't know because they had no proof. Because there is no proof that they are God's chosen people. They convinced a group of people to believe it.
Mm.
You get what I'm saying? And they would die for disbelief. They had no knowledge, no proof. There's no archaeological, there's nothing that says you are other than their belief. So I recognize the power in that. Now I'm all for we got the knowledge. We can know ourselves, right? There's enough out there. But as we bring people along, we have to give people something to believe in until they can grow to the knowing, right? Because before somebody can ever defend their truth with knowledge, it is the belief that drives them to the study. There's something here. Like, I believe there was something in the Quran that would support me participating in an activity of pouring libation. I believe that. I didn't know it was true, but I believed it enough to spend 2 weeks, right, reading it line by line to try to find some reference or parallel.
Yeah, I
So
think it's a power in mythology. I
yeah,
definitely think it's a
yes,
power in mythology, and it's one of the reasons why our ancestors used it to, like you just said, put people on a journey of knowing themselves and using the lessons taught in the mythology as lessons that they could apply or fables that they could apply in the principles of their everyday life.
yeah, yeah. And in Shay in the Yoruba culture that most people call Ifa, right? Or they say Yoruba, which is the people in their language. They deified elevated ancestors, right? Shango was an actual man. He was an actual king, separate from what became the Orisha or the Orunmila, right? But he was an actual man that lived such a life, impacted his culture in such a way that they deified him, right? And so on and so forth. But to your point about how your religion talks about land, economics, we're practicing, a lot of people practice Ifa in many forms, whether it's Santeria, whether it's Obey, they practice this Orisha lifestyle. Let's just call it that. But the reality is that belief belongs to the Yoruba people of Nigeria. It didn't exist prior to them. It only existed after them. They created it for them. Their understanding of water and their water deities was based on the waters and the systems that were around them. They're right next door to Benin, which was Dahomey, right? And Vudan. And they have their own system. These people probably genetically are the same people, right? But the Fan people and those people in Benin created a system of Vudan, right? That fit them as a people and their landmass and their understanding of creation and all of those things. So
That's
throughout
right.
history, African people have always developed their belief systems based on the geography, everything that existed within that geography, and their experience, their life experience of that geography, to your point, for the benefit of the people who believed in it and lived within that geographical
You're
location.
exactly right. Because
Yeah.
even in the Nile Valley, up and down the Nile, you'll find different trinities based upon the region or the area that they were in the Nile Valley. So the people, even though they had a common understanding, they all did it in their own separate way, and they did what was most beneficial to them. And I think that's one of the importance of one of the earlier questions that I asked you, for the people that say, why do we need a new religion? What's wrong with us is going back to the spiritual systems that our ancestors used. Where in the time and space that we in now, we have to create something that can be the most beneficial for us in this time and space now.
Yeah.
And then maybe thousands of years from now, Africans will create something new for themselves at that time.
Yeah. And to your point, I think what we understood and our intent, right, was we're not telling you to not do these things.
Right.
We're saying as you organize with us, right? Organize with us under this understanding, this belief, this system, right, for the liberation of African people. We are creating something that is designed to liberate African people out of these current conditions. Period. Nothing else. It's not designed to do anything else. It's not designed to give you individual improvement. Because to say what this is about, you can use those other systems. Because that's what I find. People will get shrines, they'll get pots, they'll get beads, they'll get all these things. But as you watch it, it is all for their personal growth and development, and it does nothing directly for the community at large to liberate us as a people. With all of the priests and no disrespect to any of them, with all of the things that we have and all the spiritual magic that we have, how are we not any closer to being liberated? Because I don't think because those systems weren't produced other than Haitian voodoo, right? That's why it's constantly under attack, right, by European forces. Other than Haitian voodoo, those systems weren't designed to liberate African people out of a condition. When the Haitians decided to do their version of voodoo, they brought two initial deities into play, luau's into play. They brought a Lekba, because they knew Papa Lekba was the opener of the way, right? And they brought Ogun, right? And he is the one who clears the way. He is the spirit of war. He is the spirit of weapons and take. Now they knew we going to war. We don't need deities that's about fertility right now. We don't need deities that's about now. We need warring deities right now because we're at war and we're trying to get free. And they structured a whole belief system around that. And then once they gain their liberation, then you start seeing other deities start to emerge later into the Haitian voodoo system. But initially, they just brought on the spirits of war. And so we have to figure out how to tap into that same energy with our ancestors as we go to liberate. And our liberation ain't just about a physical war, right? Our liberation is economic. So we have to tap into those ancestors. Our liberation is about education. So we have to tap into those ancestors. All the areas of human activity that's been laid out for us by Neely Fuller and all that, we have to tap into the most qualified ancestors, right? And that energy to guide us, not just to call their name, guide us in our work and our continued work towards liberation.
Well, I think too that's one of the positive things about this that you're proposing, ancestralism, is that all of those things, as you said earlier, can be incorporated under ancestralism because all of those things are talking about our ancestors in general. And that's one right. of the common things that you'll see across the continent in our history is that all the spiritual systems focused on, in some capacity, ancestral veneration.
Yeah. Let me also add this, because the continuous beyond. I don't want to make everything just a response, right, to our condition. Part of our collective purpose as a people. And I'm talking about Black African people. I ain't even talking about people who don't even understand that they are Black and African, right? I am talking to Black African people. Part of our collective responsibility is to bring about the good condition. And the good condition is to bring Ma'at into existence in this space, this world, this earth. That comes through us. We are Ma'at in this creation. This is why, as humans, we were given all of the faculties that, not just to say we was great and we better than the birds and all this ego stuff. No, we were given all of these faculties, all these things involved in us, because we are responsible for maintaining Ma'at on this planet. And so until we do that, and that is what ancestralism implies as well, is to bring about the good condition. And that implies all the, see, Europeans have this thing, just bear with me for a second. Europeans have this thing where they have a need to compartmentalize everything and put a neat label on these neat boxes for everything. So that's why we got things like a green movement. Black folks being green. What are you talking about? This is a green. That's our life. That's what it means to be. To be green means to be an environmentalist, to be a concern. That all conservation. That's just to be African. To be concerned with the ecology, the ecosystems, and all that was in it is what it meant to be African. Right? So we don't have to put a label and a box around it. We just have to know ourselves and then act what we know out and be African, to live African, to be the bird.
I'll say, well, I know we're running short on time, but if you could tell the people, some of the upcoming things that you have going on with ancestralism and what they can be on the lookout for.
So we were kind of trying to wait for all of COVID to see what was going to happen. We really want to open up a once a month celebration of family and community and veneration of ancestral energy once a month, because at the core of ancestralism is family. And family is, as Amos taught us, and others beyond Amos taught us, is the nucleus to power. It is our power base. It is family. We are nothing as individuals. And families are those things that formulate communities, that formulate nation states. So without family, we get nowhere. And so we have to come together in the spirit of family and then organize ourselves. How do we support ourselves economically and become self-sufficient as a family? How do we manufacture and produce as a family? How do we worship together as a family? So we have to make family a system again. And that's what Ancestralism do. So our goal is coming soon. As this thing begins to lift, but just be on the lookout for it. Right now, tentatively, it's going to be the last Sunday of every month. We will gather as a family, elevate and honor the ancestors as a family, but also continue to organize ourselves around what it looks like to be a micro community.
Shay, well, brother, it was definitely a pleasure having you on with us. And if you're listening to this in your car on a podcast, you can check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and on Google Podcasts. If you're watching this on YouTube, please share this video, like, comment, and subscribe. And also check us out on our website, AfricanLiberationMedia.com, and follow us on social media.
Brother, I apologize.
Go ahead.
We also have a ancestralism inspired and based podcast coming that will be hosted by this platform, African Liberation Media, because this is more than a podcast. This is a African Liberation Media network.
Ashe.
Yeah, one thing, Brother Almost. I don't know how many people were aware today that Sister Zinzi Mandela, the daughter of Madiba Nelson Mandela, youngest daughter of Madiba Nelson Mandela, and Mama Winnie Madikizela Mandela, transitioned today at the age of 59. She was the South African ambassador to Denmark. Haven't had a chance to find out exactly what the cause, but Sister Zinzi has transitioned to the spiritual world at the age of 59.
She rests in power. We'll be calling on you, sis.
I'll shake.
Sure.
BB48.
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 Power or the lack of power. I want to repeat this.